Statement, Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to make a statement on the release in error of Hadush Kabatu from HMP Chelmsford last Friday morning. As the House will be aware, Mr Kabatu was apprehended by the Metropolitan Police on Sunday morning in the Finsbury Park area of my constituency. He's back where he belongs, behind bars, and I'd like to thank the Metropolitan Police, Essex Police and the British Transport Police for their swift action to return him to custody, and the public who helped locate Kabatu after the police's appeal. I can tell the House that he will now be transported for deportation back to Ethiopia as quickly as possible. However, this does not change the fact that Mr Kabatu's victims are rightly outraged about what has happened, and I'm livid on their behalf. And on behalf of the public, this was a mistake that should not have happened. The victims expect better, the public expects better, and this government expects better from a critical public service, which plays a vital role in our first duty to keep the British people safe and free from harm. Madam Deputy Speaker, on Friday the 24th of October, Mr Kabatu was scheduled to be transferred from HMP Chelmsford to an immigration removal centre, from which he was to be deported. Due to what appears to have been human error, he was instead released into the community at 10:25 a.m. Shortly after 12 p.m, concerns were raised about the release to the duty governor, and following checks, staff were dispatched to locate him. When it became clear that he was no longer in the vicinity of the prison, Essex Police were notified and a manhunt began. Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service instigated an immediate investigation, and I've asked for the initial findings to be with me this week. And the House will appreciate that in the meantime there is a limit, obviously, on what I can say, but members will be aware that there are national security considerations within a case like this, and I will update the House in the appropriate way as soon as I can. But what I can say today is that there must and there will be accountability for what has happened. Madam Deputy Speaker, when I was first informed of the release in error, I spoke immediately to the duty governor at Chelmsford and senior HMPPS leaders to understand what was known and seek assurances about the immediate measures being taken. I tasked my officials working through the night and coordinated a response with the Home Office and the police. And I'd like to put on record my thanks to the Home Secretary for her engagement over the weekend. I also chaired 3 operational meetings with the police, and on Sunday was able to travel to Wood Green Police Station just outside my constituency to personally thank the police officers who caught Kabatu. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been clear from the outset that a mistake of this nature is unacceptable. We must get to the bottom of what happened and take immediate action to try and prevent similar releases in error to protect the public from harm. First, on Friday, I instructed the CEO of Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service to carry out an urgent review, to look at the checks that take place when a prisoner is released and identify immediate changes that could be made to the process in order to mitigate against the risks of release in error. As a result, HMPPS have taken steps to make these processes more robust. There will now be more direct senior accountability for ensuring protocols and checks are correctly applied, including a clear checklist for governors to determine that every step has been followed the evening before any release takes place. These are the strongest release checks that have ever been in place, and they will apply to every release from custody and are effective immediately. Second, Any foreign national offender being removed through the early removal scheme, the scheme through which Kabatu was supposed to be removed from the country, can now only be discharged when the duty governor is physically present, and there will be no ERS removals from HMP Chelmsford for the rest of this week. And third, I'm today announcing that there will be an independent investigation by Dame Lynn Owers. I spoke to her yesterday, former Deputy Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police and Director General of the National Crime Agency, and she will fully establish the facts of Kabatu's release and whether staff had sufficient experience, training and technology, and she will also talk to the victims in this case to understand the effect this incident had on them. Her report will highlight points of failure and make recommendations to help prevent further releases in error, which have been rising year on year since 2021, going from 9 per month on average in 2023 to 17 per month in the period spanning January to June 2024. And I'm clear that a single release in error is one too many, which is why we have launched this independent investigation. And I can tell the House that it will have the same status as those into other prison incidents, including the awful attack on 3 prison officers at HMP Franklin in April of this year, and the escape of Daniel Khalife from HMP Wandsworth in 2023 under the last government. Madam Deputy Speaker, releases in error are a symptom of a system that we inherited from the party opposite.
Truth hurts.
Jails were full almost to breaking point, and the threat of total collapse in law and order. The fact is that we were left with prisons reeling from historic funding reductions. Madam Deputy Speaker, a 24% real terms cut from 2010 to 2015 and 30% cuts in staffing, leaving us today with over 50% of frontline prison officers having less than 5 years' experience. It's little wonder, then, when the system has been brought to its knees, that errors like this happen. We must also be honest that the previous government's approach to this crisis, piecemeal, complex emergency releases in the hope that the system wouldn't collapse, has added to a level of complexity and pressure that makes errors more likely. This government has been transparent about the difficult decisions necessary to fix the mess for good so that prisons can keep us safe, and future governments need not find emergency solutions to free up capacity. And this government has brought forward the sentencing bill currently making its way through this House. It will ensure we have a suitable criminal justice system, one which can deliver punishment that works, that cuts crime and keeps the public safe. And this government's also building 14,000 additional prison places so that we have capacity to lock up the most dangerous offenders. This is the largest prison expansion since the Victorian era. And let's be clear, there will be more people in prison at the end of this Parliament than there have ever been before. And we've already built 2,500 additional prison places in just over a year, compared to 500 added overall to the prison estate under the Tories. And we're deporting more foreign criminals than the last government. We've changed the law last month to speed up the early removal scheme, something that, to be fair, the Shadow Justice Secretary called for, so that most foreign prisoners can now be deported after serving 30% of their custodial sentence rather than the previous 50%. And through the sentencing bill, we will go even further to deport foreign criminals as soon as possible after sentencing. I can confirm that in the year to July 2025, we sent 5,179 foreign national offenders back to the countries of origin, a 14% increase on the previous 12 months. This frees up desperately needed prison places and saves the taxpayer the £54,000 per year in cost to hold an individual offender. Madam Deputy Speaker, this context sets out the scale of the challenge, but I'm clear that releases in error are not simply a fact of life. The public will not accept that, and neither does the government. We'll get to the bottom of what happened in this case. We will take whatever steps necessary to tackle the spike in releases in error, so that we can uphold the first duty of every government to keep the public safe from harm. I commend this statement to the House.
I call Robert Jenrick, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, dear, oh dear, where to begin? This Justice Secretary could not deport the only small boat migrant who who tried to be deported. Yes. Having been mistakenly released, Hadush Kabatu came back to prison asking to be deported, not once, not twice, but 5 times. But he was turned away. Madam Deputy Speaker, the only illegal migrants this government are stopping are those that actually want to leave the UK. His officials, briefing the press, called it the mother of all. Yeah, they're not wrong, are they? Calamity Lammy strikes again. It's a national embarrassment. And today, the Justice Secretary feigns anger at what's happened. He says he is livid Kabatu was mistakenly let out. But under his plans to abolish short prison sentences that he forced through the Commons last week, Kabatu would never have even stepped foot in prison in the first place. So let's get it straight. We had the spectacle of the Metropolitan Police scouring London to find a man the Justice Secretary is simultaneously legislating to avoid sending to prison. What an absolute farce. So look, I must commend the Justice Secretary's performance. It is truly BAFTA worthy. He has perfected the art of performative outrage to a T. On Wednesday, well look, they may be laughing, but let me finish this point. On Wednesday, he will force every one of his MPs to vote again on the sentencing bill, which will see hundreds of sex offenders, just like Kabatu, avoid prison altogether. Sick men who destroy the lives of young girls, who steal their childhoods from them, they will be free to roam your communities, to steal the childhoods of your constituents. And I'll tell you who'll be livid then. The British public will be livid, and they'll know who's to blame. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Justice Secretary says he's launched an inquiry into what's happened. But he should be able to provide some basic questions to the House now. With respect to the prison in question, HMP Chelmsford, there's clearly a very significant problem. In a previous internal audit at Chelmsford, officials had marked their own homework as good, yet inspectors rated it as of serious concern. What is the Justice Secretary going to do now to address the way in which problems in our prisons are covered up routinely or wished away? On the subject of the inquiry itself, you won't be surprised to hear I am, how shall I put it, sceptical about this government's ability to conduct inquiries with any competence. Why is it limiting itself to this particular security farce and not the other glaring errors, like the doubling of drone sightings above prisons, the soaring assaults on prison officers, or the rampant extremism we're now seeing in our jails? Shocking as this accidental release is, it is not a one-off blunder. It has come to be the norm under this government, as the number of prisoners mistakenly let out early has more than doubled. So can the Justice Secretary tell the House how many of the 262 prisoners let out mistakenly in the year to March were violent or sexual offenders? And how many are still at large? There are now record numbers of foreign nationals clogging up our prisons, more than under the last government. How many of those 262 prisoners accidentally released are migrants, like Kabatu, who were awaiting deportation? Madam Deputy Speaker, can the Justice Secretary give the House his cast-iron assurance that this man will be deported from our country by the end of the week, as he promised on the news on Sunday? And if he fails, will he take responsibility and resign? And lastly, on Tuesday, the Justice Secretary blocked my amendment to release the migrant crime data. Does he now finally acknowledge that there is a link between the small boats and crime in this country? And will he call the small boats out for what they are, a national security emergency? Madam Deputy Speaker, this man should never have been in our country in the first place. That's the truth. He should have been detained. He should have been deported. Instead, he was put up in a hotel in Epping and allowed to prey on schoolgirls. Now we learn that some Labour officials privately concede that they were wrong to scrap the Rwanda plan. Be in no doubt, from start to finish, the Kabatu fiasco was a creation entirely of Labour's own making. So I say to the Justice Secretary, there's no point coming to the House today professing to be livid at the consequences of your own policies. The British people, they can see straight through you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a serious issue, and that's why there will be a full independent investigation. The Shadow Justice Secretary, I'll give him this, he's smooth. But as my mother would have said, if he was chocolate, he'd lick himself. He should hang his head in shame. The crisis in our prisons that we're faced today is because of 14 years of failure under his government. As they were packing their bags, and he knows this, to leave office, temporary release failures were under his watch. They presided over 17 mistaken releases per month. This didn't happen overnight. It was not inevitable. It was the choices that his party made through 14 years of chaos. They said that they were the government of security and safety. They oversaw rising violent crime and crumbling courts and crumbling prisons. Again and again, they promised 20,000 extra prison places, and they managed an extra 500 in 14 years. They promised to remove more foreign national offenders from prisons. They failed. They promised investment and expansion in the prison system, but budgets stalled. They promised investment in the police, but again, we saw the police cut by 20,000. They promised increases in access to justice. We did not see that. We saw almost the collapse of legal aid. Violence went up in our prisons. Self-harm went up in our prisons. Drug abuse went up in our prisons. And prison officer numbers were cut under his watch. And he comes here and has the brass neck to give the impression that this started just 14 months ago. Let me just pause there. William Fernandez was released in error in March 2021. He was a sexual predator. He raped a 16-year-old and sexually assaulted another young woman after he was let out by prison in 2021. Was there an independent investigation? No, not from their side. Rayan Nubi, released in error in March 2023. Again, a man who was mistaken released from a Category B prison. Was there an independent investigation under his watch? No, there wasn't. Laura Matavoulis, again released in error in December 2021. Was there any independent investigation? None at all. And he comes here with the brass neck. I've asked Lynn Owens to look at this. I've asked her if she can do it. in 8 months. Of course, we'll come back to the House when in 8 weeks, when that is done. And all of what he has said, what happened, looking over this period of time, is subject to that review. And then he says that the sentencing review will actually let more foreign nationals out. He's wrong. We've actually brought down the threshold so that you can now be deported with just a suspended sentence. He knows that. Read clause 42 of the bill and he will understand it properly.
Chair of the Select Committee, Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the pressure on prison front desks and the complexity of rules for release, this was an accident waiting to happen. One thing that might bring down the number of releases in error is the digitising of prisoner records. On visits to prisons, Justice Committee members are often horrified to find them relying on handwritten files. While some parts of the justice system are entertaining AI, why are prisons still run on pen and paper systems?
Minister.
Well, the right honourable friend raises a very important point, and he knows that up to this day, in part because of concerns about the use of technology by prisoners, there largely isn't Wi-Fi or anything like that available on our prison sites. And for that reason, it is a paper-based system which will always be subject to some human error. But in the context in which, under the last government, there was this continued early release scheme done on the quiet, and indeed because of the changes that we're making in the sentencing bill,